All right, folks, welcome to a special edition of the McKinney Podcast. This episode is going to be different in that we don't have live in-person guests due to scheduling concerns and just the logistics of everybody running businesses and whatnot. We're going to have two recorded phone calls. First, from the side opposing the proposition we're going to talk about here in just a moment, and second, from Mayor George Fuller, who is one of the key proponents for the proposition. The question at hand is the ballot measure known as Proposition A for 2024. And the main question of the ballot is whether or not the voters will approve increasing the term limits for city council and mayor to 3 consecutive terms, or 4-year terms. So it's a total of 12 years. And the proposal is basically saying moving from 2 to 3 consecutive terms. So moving from 8 to 12 for city council at the voters' approval, of course. Both sides of this question have very strong opinions, as you can imagine. And the first of the people we're going to talk to in this episode is going to be Paul Chabot, I believe is how you say his name, spelled Chabot, but Chabot, I believe, is the correct pronunciation. And I'm going to ask Paul to answer some questions that we have come up with from contemplating the best way to approach this. It is our responsibility at the McKinney Podcast to be as balanced and unbiased as possible. Obviously, Fred and I both have opinions. We are citizens. We are dads and husbands and business owners and whatnot. We definitely have opinions, but you guys don't need to hear our strongly worded opinions. I will do my best to stay as completely unbiased as I can in this conversation. If you want to ask me what my personal opinions are, I'm happy to share those, but this is not going to be a James and Fred talk about the issue and what they think you as the voters should do. I wanted you to hear straight from the two guys that are leading the conversation on both sides. So let me go ahead and pull my board up here and get Paul Chabot on the phone, and we will continue this conversation momentarily. All right, folks, I'm here with Paul Chabot, and he is the leader, the co-founder of Collin County Citizens for Integrity PAC, that's Political Action Committee, and he's going to have this conversation with us about Prop A that's going to be on the ballot on November 5th. Paul, thanks for joining us, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this out there for folks to hear both sides. Great job.
Absolutely. When Fred and I decided to launch the McKinney Podcast, this kind of situation was exactly where our head was at, where, the podcast can really bring people together, have important conversations where it's not a shouting match on social media or, competing yard signs around the city. So I'm just going to jump right in here. I sent you these questions yesterday, so I'm just going to plow through them and let you tell us exactly what's on your mind. And the voters get to decide on not May 5th. That's already passed us. November the 5th. So Paul, tell me if you don't mind, how did Collin County Citizens for Integrity PAC come to be created?
Got created about 6 months ago when Frederick Frazier was running for re-election. He was indicted on 2 felonies. Local grassroots voters were pretty fed up with that. And so there was a group of neighbors and others came together, said, we need to bring integrity back into politics, regardless of political affiliation, because right now politicians are not in the top 10 of the most respected folks on people's radar. And so this is our town, McKinney. Collin County's a great place to raise a family, but we want to make sure that integrity is at the forefront of all we do. So we had a very successful effort in that last endeavor. And this one just sort of fell in our lap, basically a few weeks ago. This was not on our radar, this proposition. And quite honestly, there's another entity that is doing a great job, telling the truth on this as well. So we're not the only show in town in trying to do an educational campaign and outreach with voters. We are one of another.
Okay. So if you don't mind me just getting straight to the point, what is the basis of your opposition to Prop A?
Yeah, bottom line, it's misleading. And I think that if you follow the chatter on whether it's Nextdoor or Facebook, regardless of political affiliation, uh, voters and citizens don't want to be misled. And that is the sentiment, that not what we're saying, but it's how people feel. So we conducted 2 polls out there, and it's pretty stark when you look at the ones that are out there, and they match national polling on term limits. About 87% of those that were polled in McKinney want to keep term limits, but those numbers get a bit reversed when they read the current proposition, because they believe that it is implementing term limits. And what it's actually doing is extending it from 2 terms to 3, so 8 years to 12. Term limits has always been a key part of our society. George Washington believed in it. 86% of the general public, not just in McKinney mirrors the general public, believes in term limits. But this comes down to one word, and that's integrity. And this ballot proposition is not worded in the way that it should, to be honest to the voters.
Okay. No, fair enough. If you don't mind, a little bit of recalibrating a follow-up question there. Let me just ask you directly, since it sounds like the basis is really a word or rhetorical structuring of the way that the prop is worded, and I can totally see how people would wish that things were worded differently. Obviously, I didn't have anything to do with the wording of that. We'll have George Fuller on to talk about some of that and ask him some hard questions too. So I'm going to just ask you as an individual, Paul, what do you think about the idea of increasing term limits from 2 to 3? So it'd be 12 years in total.
No, my personal belief is no. I think having term limits set in the city of McKinney already dealt with this a number of years ago. And so citizens kind of already spoke on that matter. And I really feel like when you read the traffic, when you read the responses back to polls, to the data, we do a lot of data collection. My doctoral degree is in organizational management and leadership. Data is really big. Polling is really big. And asking questions of voters, not just citizens, but those that are going to show up at the ballot box, is really critical. So we asked a number of questions, not only about the ballot proposition, but others that are fairly interesting. For example, do you feel McKinney is on the right track, wrong track? That's a very traditional political question to gauge where the electorate is. Right now, the majority feel that McKinney is on the wrong track. Now, we didn't delve into the reasons why, but that's a pretty stark number right now. And so you're seeing a lot of angst, anger, frustration on social media. And that's really the only platform right now where people are generally sharing their sentiment on this issue. Really important as well. There was a Texas Supreme Court case that came out where Dallas had a misleading ballot proposition. And the Texas Supreme Court basically told Dallas in September, you've got to remove that. It's misleading. And so Dallas did the right thing. They listened to the Supreme Court. They understood the ballot propositions were misleading and reworded it. And so that was really kind of the hope here, is that McKinney City Council would have taken a look at this ballot proposition and said, it's not what it says, but it does. And number two, the people never asked for this in McKinney. The council put together a commission of people that they know, that they appoint, and those very same people did not come back to them saying that we think we should increase term limits. They came back with other suggestions. Third, there was no public sentiment. There was no organic effort to ask to increase term limits. So you create the suspicion amongst the voters of who's really behind this. And when you look at the pro proposition on A, it's a lot of former elected officials or deep-pocketed donors. But I think rightfully and smartfully, not a single elected city council member is listed as endorsing Proposition A. So it's fascinating here, but I really feel like as we get to the election day, the voters here are getting informed, and what you're doing and others are doing is giving them an opportunity to make a decision based on the facts.
Cool. Now that's a good way of stating your perspective. Thank you. Why is it a bad idea to allow duly elected council members to continue to serve if that is the will of the voters of McKinney? Because personal opinion, I don't have any problem with term limits. I agree that term limits are a good thing. Local politics obviously is very, very different than state and federal politics. The folks that serve on city council and mayor all have full-time jobs. Most of them are either entrepreneurs or in some executive function, whether it's a banker or commercial real estate or attorney or whatever. But the local politics, the term limits are still there because cronyism in the good old boy system is a danger in local politics, perhaps even more so than at the state or federal level. But that being said, why is it a bad idea to allow elected officials to continue to serve if that is the will of the voters of McKinney?
Well, and that's just it. If it's the will of the voters, then let it be. And that's really the crux of this. If this is what the voters want, then so be it. We just want the voters to know what it is that they're voting for. And that's why the misleading words on Proposition A have driven up such concern amongst your local neighbors, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican. I don't think this really has anything to do with an individual or a personality or people serving. People feel like this is mischievous, that how it was worded was dishonest. And then once people begin to challenge the honesty of their elected officials, they begin to challenge other ideas. For example, you have ballot Proposition B, which is to increase pay of city council members. Now, I think right now is probably the dumbest time to ask the public to give politicians a raise when people are having a hard time paying. But, so be it. I mean, yeah, pay's low. It's a thankless job. God bless the people that do council and school board. I get that. It's a rough job for a low pay. Right now is probably not the right time to ask, at least according to polling. But here's what's different about Prop A and Prop B is the council, when they wrote or approved Prop B, they rightfully said it's not going to impact them. It will be future members. Well, why do they not do that with Prop A as well? And more so clean up the language to be direct and say it is going to extend term limits of current members. A and B are polar opposites of each other. At least B is honest. I think it's dumb to ask for a raise politically in this session, but so be it. At least voters know what it is.
Well, you got ahead of me there. I love it. I don't have to ask you the next question then, because as I was doing my research for this, I had a firsthand story of one of your door knockers that stated to a McKinney resident that Prop B would give City Council the authority to give themselves a raise, basically whenever they please, without the approval of the voters. And in reading through Prop B in its entirety and reading through the city website, looking at Section 16 of the city charter, it seems pretty clear that that is objectively not what Prop B would do. So I guess because I don't see really much of anything on your website here, CollinCountyIntegrity.com, talking about Prop B. You're mostly focused on Prop A. So you guys
Yeah, we're
don't
only
have strong
focused
opposition
on
to Prop B, I take it?
no, and we also don't have door knockers discussing it. So these are probably just ordinary average folks knocking on doors. We're not aware of that. Our campaign is very crystal clear. We're up on Facebook with ads. We're doing consistent posts and interviews the best that we can. So it's neat to hear that local citizens are out there knocking on doors. Personally, I've not had a single door knocker this political season. Maybe because I got a no soliciting sign that keeps them away.
Well, I haven't either, and that's a good thing. I'm not a fan of door knocking in any fashion, whether you're a Jehovah's Witness or Mormon or solar salesman or whatever the door knocking happens to be. I categorically
Right.
don't like door knockers. So, last question, then I'll get you on your way, man. I promised you about 10 or 15 minutes, and we're just about there. So, as any time that there's a political action committee conversation, I'm always checking with the city secretary just to see, hey, what's going on? Is there paperwork filed? Are there financials there? Because regardless of who you are, where you're from, like there's certain requirements for a political action committee. It appears as of, and this is last week, so maybe it's changed since then, that your PAC had not filed their financial disclosures with the city secretary's office. What's going on there?
Yeah, great question. So we are filed with the TEC, Texas Ethics Commission. We've already been in discussions with them. We have to file with them, and our reporting is there. If you collect under 900 and something dollars in a reporting period, that when you go online to submit your report, it asks you specifically check a box, yes or no. If you've not collected over that amount, then no report is due. The next reports to TEC are due on the 28th, and we will have more expenditures over that threshold. So you will see a report come out on October 28th. So yes, we're in compliance.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. And that's really all I have as far as questions for you, Paul. Is there any final statement before I let you go?
I'll just tell you, I'm really impressed with the voters in McKinney. They are smart. The city has grown to 220,000. There's so many qualified people here that can run for city council. Um, I just think that the incumbency people might say, what's the problem with this? Well, when you're an incumbent running for an elected position, there's over an 80-something% chance you're going to get reelected because you're getting donors from developers and others in your own backyard to afford the mailers, the TV ads. It's very hard for ordinary average citizens to pick themselves up by the bootstraps and run for political office. Term limits is really about new blood, new people, new ideas, keeping the system growing. 220,000 people in McKinney. We've got a lot of bright people on the horizon to lead this city down the road. It's exciting to be here around amazing citizens and a great, great place to be. So thanks for having me and all the great work you're doing. Our website is Collin County Citizens for Integrity, and others can go there and take a look and learn more about what we're doing and join us as well. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Paul Chabot, for your time today. I appreciate it. And that's it for this segment, folks. We'll go ahead and cut the video now to our recording that will happen tomorrow with Mayor George Fuller. Thanks so much. Thanks, Paul.
All right, my friend. Have a great day.
You too, man. Bye. All right, now for part 2 of the conversation, we're going to have George Fuller, Mayor of McKinney, on the phone and ask him some questions from the other side of the coin. So let's get him on the phone right now. All right, we've got George Fuller, Mayor of McKinney, on the line. George, thanks so much for spending some of your valuable time with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Now, this Prop A thing has gotten a lot more publicity than I think really anybody expected. I don't know what your thoughts are just in general of how did this become such a contentious thing. I'm going to start at the beginning and ask you basically the same flavor of question that I asked Paul. How did Prop A come to be? Whose idea was it? What was the impetus for even creating Prop A to begin with?
Yeah, well, Prop A ultimately came out of a charter review committee, and cities periodically, probably not enough, put together charter review committees, review the charter, and consider different items that could need updating or changes, or cities are growing. Our city today is obviously much different than when our charter was first written. So the charter committee ultimately is where all of the props came from. We charged them with with the responsibility to again review the charter, look at different items, make recommendations. What they did do, though, I'll say this: they came back and said, we're not going to make a recommendation, but we're going to provide you with the information. What was the end result after 6 weeks of meetings with a group of 21 very, very diverse residents? What was the outcome? And then provided us the information. The council reviewed that information and made recommendations accordingly.
One of the accusations of the other side, the folks that formed a PAC a few months ago and are leveraging that PAC to advocate for people voting against this, is that the charter committee did not recommend anything around Prop A, and depending on how you read the wording, they are saying that the charter committee actively did not agree with the impetus for Prop A. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't know where that would come from. Everyone has the ability to go back and watch those meetings. They were recorded meetings with the committee. And at the end of the day, again, after 6 weeks, they came back on Prop A specifically. 13 of the 21 members had identified that they would like to see terms extended to 3 or greater.
Mm-hmm.
8 people believe that they should stay the same. So you have a 13-8 vote, if you will, as to Prop A and the extending terms to 3 or again greater in some cases, I guess was the opinion of some of the 13.
I mean, the numbers don't lie. So, 13 to 8, I'm pretty sure my math says that that's a passing vote. So the charter committee
Well,
is in support
if
of
we were in
Prop
an
8.
election, that would be referred to as a landslide. But
Yeah, I think so.
but John, I can tell you this: I can't speak for all the council, though. I believe the sentiment was expressed by every member on council at some point or another that our position, because we had a lot of people contacting us, right, for and against, and I believe that everyone expressed, and if I'm wrong on this, it's maybe one may not have specifically, but I believe every one of us did, that we were going to follow what the charter committee came back with, regardless of what our personal beliefs were or what our personal perspectives were. And that was my position. My position was whatever the consensus was, I would go with. I mean, I certainly have my take on terms and term limits and all that, but at the end of the day, we put together a committee, and I was committed to listen to what the committee came back with.
And I think that's the right move when you're sitting there in the seat with the power to, make decisions. And if there's a question mark, I think just from a leadership perspective, that was definitely the right move.
Well, and remember the decision we made. I hear all these terms, right? Oh, it's a power grab. I don't understand that. Power is and always has been and always will be, as long as we have a democracy, with the voters. There's no power grab. Our decision was not to extend term limits. Our decision was to allow voters, the electorate, our community, to decide whether they believe there is benefit to extending term limits or not.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day, that's what we voted to do, is to let the community make a decision. So when you started in the beginning by saying or asking or making a comment, I guess, that it's become a very divisive issue, and I would tell you, I never expected it to be, quite frankly. If we were voting, if we had the ability to extend our own terms, absolutely attack all day long. But the decision was, let's allow the community to decide what the majority of the charter committee review committee came to us with. Let's put it to the voters.
One of the main points that Paul made on the opposition was, and on their website, they pretty definitively state that the folks that wrote the prop are being intentionally misleading in the way that it's worded, so that people that may not be totally familiar with the way things are may not be aware that there already are term limits, of course, 2 consecutive terms, 4 years each, so 8 years in office for council and mayor. One of the key points they made was the wording is intentionally misleading. What's your take on that? And did you guys consider, after receiving feedback, rewording the prop to make it more clear?
So when they say, and I haven't seen the specific language or their specific allegation, but they say the folks. I don't know who they think the folks are. The language on the ballot, as all language on the ballot, is done by outside legal counsel. So to say that this misleading, the charter language, the Prop A language, specifically states what the new language would be. It specifically tells you, do you consent to having paragraph, whatever I don't remember the page and paragraph, but whatever that specific aspect of the charter is, to be rewritten to have 3 consecutive terms. I mean, it's the specific language that would be in the charter. Talk about charter language. If we were writing the language, people bring the airport into this discussion a lot, and both individually and along with this discussion. If you remember, the ballot language for the airport stated that, asked the question, do you approve $200 million in general obligation debt for which the city will impose a tax sufficient to pay principal and interest? And I wasn't happy with that bond language, because just purely, forget my position on the airport, purely in my mind, that led people to believe that the city will, it stated, it will impose a tax. It unfortunately, because of the way the language had to be written, it doesn't give the opportunity. I would have loved that language to say, the city has a tax called the INS portion of your tax rate, for which the city has the ability to bond an additional $200 million with the retiring of other debt and to not increase that INS rate, and will have no impact on your property taxes. Oh, I would love that language because I feel that's tremendously comprehensive.
Yep.
But it wasn't. So my point in that is the idea that we wrote the bond language, or this nefarious group of quote folks.
Yep.
Outside counsel determines how that language needs to be written, and they write it. And I don't, in this case, they write the specific language, so I don't have an issue with it. I certainly did have an issue with the bond language.
So just to be clear, the sticking point for the other side was handled entirely by an outside legal counsel, and that you guys as counsel and you as mayor didn't write this yourself.
We did not write the language. We saw the language as the community saw the language when it was posted.
Okay. So just to be 100% clear, folks, and I'm trying to stay as neutral as possible. I'm not even offering my opinion on the subject in this episode. To state that Prop A is intentionally misleading, based on what George just said, is factually, objectively false. Just to be clear. So.
Yeah, and I would say that, I've received emails from the opposition, and I've received emails from the supporting PAC, and you want to talk about misleading. I mean, I could spend all day talking about the misleading information from the opposition. Yeah. The supporting PAC states very clearly in bold print, Proposition A does not remove term limits, though it extends the current term limit by one additional term for mayor and council.
Yep.
The pro side. You talk about integrity. I get a kick out of the name of the other PAC, by the way, based on their behavior. But the pro PAC, there's no misleading. No one is trying to pretend there's not term limits and this would put in term limits. They are being very, very forthright. They are being very, very specific in what Proposition A does, going beyond what just the language states. Mm-hmm. So the idea that anyone is trying to mislead on the pro side is highly contradicted factually by what they're putting out and what they're saying versus what this other PAC is saying.
So last question here, and this one came up a few different times in the comments and emails that I had with folks on the subject of Prop A versus Prop B. Prop B is kind of tangential to this conversation, where it brings in additional compensation for council and mayor. A lot of folks may not have any idea that the current compensation is $50 a month. Yeah, I said it, 50, not 500 or 5,000, but $50 a month, and then 100 for mayor, adjusting that up to $750 for council and $1,000 a month for mayor. But the council removed themselves from the current members are not affected by Prop B, and that was very intentionally so. And I think it was smart on your part to let people know, hey, we are not doing this so that we personally can make more money. This is a general thing that we think should be in place. A lot of folks wanted to see the current council and current mayor hold themselves exempt from Prop A as well. Why didn't you guys exempt yourselves from being included in a potential increase in term limits, which, if I'm not mistaken, would give you the opportunity to run for a third term of mayor and would give any currently sitting council members a third term if they so choose. What's the rationale there?
Well, I would say that they're actually pretty identical. The Prop A, or both Prop A and Prop B, don't provide. Let's call, because I hear the other side, refer to it as let's call it a benefit, right? A benefit of being paid or a benefit of serving again. Mm-hmm. Both propositions require you to actually be elected to be the recipient of that benefit, if you want to call it a benefit. So in both cases, anyone on council today, whether you're talking about serving another term or receiving a pay increase, has to be elected. So they're actually the same. The only reason why the language is different in Prop B is that there are council members that, we passed this and they are still on council for another year or 2 years prior to having to go through a re-election. So again, I don't know that the word benefit is the right when you go into a position of service like this and you, quite frankly, give up a whole lot to do it.
Yes.
But but you have to be elected in both cases. To serve another term, I have to be elected. To receive a pay increase, which again, I don't mean this in any arrogant way, is not really relevant to me. The
No.
pay increase going from whatever it is today to $1,000 a month as mayor, but you have to be elected, and either for Prop A or for Prop B to impact you as a council member, you must be elected. And isn't that, at the end of the day, isn't that the whole idea of our democracy? That these decisions are put in the hands of the community, put in the hands of the voter. So I don't see a difference between the two. You have to be elected.
That makes sense. So the you kind of addressed this earlier, but I want to explicitly address it because it's probably the biggest thing that comes up from folks that oppose you as an individual and your vision for McKinney. Is this just a power grab, an ego festival from George Fuller and his cronies to stay in power and to exert an inordinate amount of influence over the way things happen in McKinney? What's your take on that? How do you refute the folks that say that this is the George Fuller festival?
First of all, making this about any individual is ridiculous and absurd. It's about the office. This is something that goes well beyond George Fuller's current service, or any possible future service, which of course I've never have not made that decision at this point. But this is about the office. It's not about any one individual. I know I hear people talk about, the airport, and want to continue pursuing the airport. The airport, we have, well, you know what? You didn't ask me specifically about the airport, so I'll leave that on the side right now. But
no, go there if you want to. It's definitely a relevant conversation, but it is tangential for sure.
Well, this idea that this is a master ploy for George Fuller to stay in power, to be able to further his nefarious future for the airport, is absurd. Number one, if we have airlines, we're talking about passenger service, obviously is where a lot of this comes from, pro and opposition to passenger service. We have passenger airlines today ready to come into McKinney Airport that want to fly today, would sign an agreement today. We have that and have had that. We've not done that because we believe that the airport needs more consideration, and exactly how that future looks and how we plan that future for the airport is bigger than trying to just put in passenger service today for the sake of passenger service. So, but if my goal was, man, I want passenger service at the airport, and it's available today. I could do that right now. We could vote on that. We could bring that before the council, and we could move forward with two airlines that would like to be there. That's not my. Again, I've not decided. Let's say this does pass. Well, I've not made the decision to run. I would love to see. There's plenty of qualified, wonderful people in this community that care about this community and care about the future and have a servant's heart. And I would love to get behind one of them and be a cheerleader for them and watch somebody else take the baton and run forward. Yeah. And get back to my life, my family life, my business life, all of which taken a tremendous hit and sacrifice over the last 7.5 years. Yep. That's my hope. Would I run? I'm asked that all the time. If it passes, would I run again? Well, if I'm sitting here in January, I think like any of us that have the desire or the willingness to serve, if that person isn't there, hasn't signed up, or people, multiple, and there was and the only people signed up to run were people, I think, with the
self-interest, special agenda,
self-interest, and didn't have an agenda that was community centric. I would run, but again, I'd have to be elected. Yep. And people have to make that decision. What do they think about the last 7 years? Where are we as a city today? I of course I have great belief in this city. I love the fact that we're the #1 housing market in the country. I love the fact that we've doubled our business commercial tax base in the last 7 years, that we've doubled our sales tax revenue, that we've lowered the tax rate 29%, that we've had the lowest effective tax rate over the last 7 years than we have in decades. I think the city is on a great path. I think that's I give most of that credit to the staff. We have a tremendous staff, a tremendous city manager, and we also have a great council. We have a council that is here with a true desire to make decisions that are important to the city. And we talk about the airport. We own the airport. This idea that we can neglect it or shy away from it. This is an asset that pays over $3.5 million a year in property and school tax that offset residential tax burden. It is providing over $250 million in economic impact to the region. It is why our number one employers, what they will tell you, that top three reason they're in the city of McKinney is because of the airport and the advantages and conveniences and business benefit that it provides to them. We have one of the largest defense contractors in the city that would not be here. It would not have expanded over $500 million in the last number of years without the airport and the ability to do what they need to do. This airport is extremely important to this community. It absolutely is. So we have a fiduciary responsibility to that asset. And the idea that, I know some people don't get it. They don't really understand all that it does for the community and in the community. And I certainly may have been one of those people before being elected and really understanding it. But it is an important asset.
No, I completely agree. And, later on today, Ken Carley is actually going to be here in the studio recording his own episode as the director of the airport, and very much looking forward to that one. For the purposes of this conversation, I think we're at a great stopping point here, George. Any last words about Prop A before we go?
I think that this will be in the hands of the voter, and that's where it should be. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. My life, contrary to what some say, my life will go on just fine either way. So
you've got May Lee, you've got 4 kids, you've got Guitar Sanctuary, you've got a construction company. You got plenty to go with your time.
I got plenty to do. And although I must say I'd miss all the adoration I get on social media from my devoted hater group.
The keyboard warriors that love to hate you.
Keyboard warriors, they love to hate me. They never met me, but they love to hate me.
When you are finally done with public office, at whatever point that is, are you going to miss it? Because it's kind of entertainment and sport, right?
It's funny. My wife, if she were here on this interview, she would tell you that I handle conflict, well, that I'm able to, take this stuff and let it roll off my back. Yeah. And, if I'm being honest, it would, and vulnerable, if you will, I think I'm able to do that better than some, and maybe better than a lot, but it wears on you. It absolutely wears on you. And, and it just to go to be past that and to not have that's certainly an appeal. Will I miss it? I've developed tremendous relationships within the county, the state, and the federal government. A lot of those relationships have manifested into real big wins from our council to the community. I mean, over $250 million in outside money that otherwise we would have been bonding for infrastructure and whatnot. And so, just those successes that we as a team have had. Will I miss that? Sure. Just like, I guess, if you've had a winning season in sports and football, I missed when I stopped playing football. I missed it. Yeah. Because you like having those successes. And are the failures tough? Sure. But at the end of the day, there's hopefully people in this job have a servant's heart, and their desire is to serve. And regardless of some of the stuff I read, we've got 7 people on council that actually care about the community. They actually care about the residents. They actually care about how to improve quality of life. How do we continue to maintain those things that are important to the city? And we do. Do we make? Are there mistakes made? History will tell, and I'm sure we do. But at the end of the day, the city has 7 members of council that actually care, and I'll miss serving with them. and I'll miss serving with the staff because we have an incredible staff.
The voters get the final say, and November 5th can't get here fast enough as far as I'm concerned. I think we're all very tired.
Amen.
We're very, very tired of the back and forth. I look at the voices on both sides, and I see the people that are for it and are against it. And there's one thing that I notice about the people that tend to be for all four of the props. They are serving on boards and commissions. They're active in their community. They are volunteer leaders in local nonprofits. They have graduated from Leadership McKinney. They are participating in constructive ways in the process. I didn't want to put the opposition leader on the spot and seem rude or impolite to someone, but I asked around, and no, he hasn't graduated Leadership McKinney. He hasn't served on any board or commission that I'm aware of in McKinney. He has a nonprofit for drug prevention for youth, but he's a good example of opposition that is not engaging in the way that the people that are for it are. And I'm sorry, if you're serving on a board or a commission, if you are actively involved in making the sausage, as they say, your opinion carries more weight with me as a voter because
I
go ahead.
Yeah, I looked. I went on the Citizens for McKinney is their website, the Pro PAC, and it was it gave me a warm feeling when I looked at people that are endorsing. To your point, Judy Gay, right? John and Judy Gay Library, and John Gay, former mayor, former Sheriff Terry Box, Richard Dodson, head of the GOP Republican Men's Club. Betty and Jim Pekisek, Brian and Donna Lockmiller, former mayor. The list, and it goes on and on and on and on. Yep. Hundreds of people that are, and there's not a name that I saw. And there's some names I saw. I didn't know them personally, but I would say 95% of the people, the names I see, I recognize them. Whether I know them or not, I recognize them as people that have served.
Yeah.
And it was, it's crazy. It speaks to your point that, these are people that are engaged, that understand. A lot of them are former mayors and council members that have served and understand the role, understand what advantages there are when you have more continuity or longevity, and how that longevity manifests into relationships with our county and state and federal partners, and how that then manifests into things that are benefits to the community. So it was nice to see all the very, very engaged people, past and present, that are supporting it.
George, I really appreciate your time today. I think we're at a good stopping point. I'm going to go ahead and let you get back to your Friday, and thanks so much for your time.
I appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Thanks.
Talk soon. Take care. Right. Folks, that is about as clear-cut as I can make it. Whether you are for or against, make sure you are voting on November 5th. There's so many reasons to vote on November 5th, but this obviously is a big one because it has a large impact with the way that things happen here at home at our local city elections. And that's it for this episode of the McKinney Podcast. On behalf of co-host Fred Mahusay, that's really all there is to say. Make it a great day, ladies and gentlemen. We will talk to you again real soon. Y'all take care.